Call the board meeting to order. I'll open up for any public comments on the action items this afternoon. And seeing no one stepping up to the podium, I want to thank FCTA for your support, the work that we've had over the last few weeks on the contract. Happy to share with the board and make a motion to the board to approve the 2020-2021 collective bargaining agreement that was passed by FCTA yesterday. So with that, I'll make the motion for approval. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Christy. Christy, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Becky?
Yes.
And Ryan?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so that motion passes. We have a good contract for 2020-21. So with that, I will close the board meeting, and then I will open the public hearing for the superintendent's contract. So we've met this week with Dr. Clendenning through his annual review, and we have the following terms that the board would like to extend for his contract. We will add a year term, an additional year term to his contract, which would take him out to June 30th, 2024. We will increase his annual salary to $170,311.89. We will include Dr. Clendenning as the last member of the Franklin School Corporation in the collective bargaining agreement that allows the one-time base increase of $1,000 for achieving a master's degree and a one-time increase of $1,000 for accruing the 90-day sick. This $2,000 will be added to his base salary shown above. The work year stays at 260 days with 22 days vacation. His retirement fund would stay the same at 3% based on the new base salary. The annuity would also stay the same, payments on the amount of $10,000. Health insurance would increase just because of the base salary increase, so that would go up by $116, and we would contribute into $2,516. We would leave the life insurance and disability the same at $125,000 for insurance and disability insurance. We would maintain his car allowance at $3,500 annually. This would cover those mileage and his state just lost it, the registration fees. Thank you. And then any personal memberships, dues, recognition there, we would cover, as well as any conferences that he would attend through the state or that. Though we will say that from a board's view, there's no travel, there's no conferences that we're approving because of the COVID. And then finally, we will come back again in a year to evaluate his performance contract on that. So with that, I'll open up to the public if there's any comments, any questions on what I just covered. Okay, seeing none, then we will close the public hearing, and now I'll open the work session. So this afternoon, we've asked Steve Ahaus and Rita to join us as we talk about making plans going to phase 4. Steve, David, and I spoke earlier this week. Steve raised an issue that I thought was very important for the board to hear of something that we hadn't considered from the board is, as we talk about the different changes and changing dates, there is an operational factor, right? So there is a point where we ought to say we shouldn't move any because of the disruption is greater than that. So hopefully Steve's got that to talk about. And then Steve, I think David has shared with you, I'd also like to talk about once COVID really starts hitting us, and it sounds like it's ramping up here, right? What are the from an operational side, staff, what are those thresholds that we need to be aware of that you would come back and ask the board to take action on?
Yeah, I think just
covering both of those. I think those topics of both kind of, I think as we get through the school year, we're starting to see, we start getting our own data. I know we're looking at data points and kind of in the world of COVID and what's around with us. We're also seeing data points within the building with our students. As the school year goes on and things like students on graduation track, passing and failing grades, attendance, we're starting to get out 5, 10, 8, 14, 18-day letters, dealing with probation, dealing with, there's a lot of other metrics that start to develop within the building of things that go on that, within the first few weeks, you don't see those things. But now that we're 9 weeks in, we start to get a picture of kind of how are things going internally in the building. And so I think that's one thing that I think at some point those metrics, I could bring those, and I know we're trying to pull some of those things together. I think that's something that I could bring to the board, just kind of how are those things going in the building, because there are some concerns in some areas and things that we're seeing. I think one of the other topics, and that was the first one that you brought up, was looking at phases in a semester. Certainly our goal has always been to try to get students back as much as possible into the classroom. But at some point here in this semester, I do believe that we would reach a point where that may be difficult to do because of the way that we have to operate at the end of the semester and then going into the next semester. We'll have to start scheduling kids. We'll have to start deciding, our students, we continue to be all online. Will they be in the hybrid model? What model will we be in? Do parents make that decision again at the semester on what they're doing? Do we have final exams? When do we have those final exams? There are certainly things, any kind of change in a phase impacts every structural part of our building. So it impacts custodians, it impacts bus drivers, it impacts cafeteria workers, our teachers' aides. All of our operations change if we go from one phase to another. And so we're either preparing for one or going back and working with hybrid and with virtual stuff. So to do that takes a lot of preparation to get ready for it, and then there's a time that elapses within the first few weeks of that. That's just, the change is difficult on the building, just to totally change what you're doing and go to something else. And as the weeks go on, so I guess what I'm kind of proposing there is potentially the conversation start around when would that date be in the semester where we would say, I'm not sure if it's productive to change everything right now. If we've gone this far, then do we make a change? And does all of that change over to all of the personnel and all of the people, is that a productive thing for us to do at that point? Or is it to just stay consistent with that? Because one thing that we have experience is each time that comes up as, well, we might change next week, or we may change 2 weeks from now. There's a lot that goes on to get ready for that, and there's stress that's felt into the building each time that happens. And so we know that we prepared. We talked about that in the summer, that look, we've got to go into this year, and we don't know what it might look like week to week or month to month. But there is a certain calm that comes to knowing what next week brings. For our teachers, for example, they plan lessons for the week after fall break that they will now go shift and change those lessons to. And the example I've used is with our science teachers. They do a lot of the flipped classroom, where they would be doing a chemistry lab, let's say, with kids when they're here. And then the kids at home would kind of be prepping for that lab. So then on the next 2 days, they would flip that around, and the kids would be doing the lab and the kids would be doing stuff at home, because you want to do those lab experiences when the kids are in the classroom, and that's where you have to do those. So that was when everyone's all in person. They now created lessons where now they can instruct and do their labs and do all that stuff with all of their kids. Well, that was all planned, and now they're going back to say, well, now I've got to redo all of those lessons and get the labs ready for these 2 days, and now labs for Thursday and Friday, and now get lessons ready for Monday and Tuesday for kids that won't be here, that I thought were going to be here. So our teachers have worked really hard. They understand that concept. We've talked about how that it could just be that way through the semester, but each time that happens, that does cause a ripple through all of them, that they've kind of got to reset that stuff. So. And I think Rita and I have, go ahead if you want to, yeah.
Just to add on, I don't know that I'm going to say anything different, but I think Mark Callan coined the term with us flexibility fatigue. And I mean, our teachers have been so flexible, I think. And I can't commend the job that they've done since March more. But it's emotionally exhausting to continue to prepare and know that something might change. And I know that they're ready, and they're not complaining. They really aren't. They've been very positive throughout all of that. But I think that that's something to consider. And I think also that they're starting to see the kids struggle. This first grade checkpoint for us was pretty eye-opening, I think, for kids and parents and teachers, and just looking at the kids, some of our more vulnerable kids especially, and our teachers teach, but they also, their hearts are why they are in this profession, and I think they're really starting to, it's wearing on them to see kids struggle, to see them give up, to see them face these challenges. So I think that that's all, in addition to the operation side of it. We look at it from a building or from a corporation level, and transportation and cafeteria and all of those things are true, but they have their own mini operational system within their classroom that they have to adjust for. Even just thinking about seating charts and arrangements where kids are sitting now, you know, what is it going to look like, and how do I prepare for that? And these seating charts that we're asking them to keep updated, it's all in a constant state of change. And I just think that that adds an entirely different layer of emotional stress in an already difficult situation. So just something to consider as we are making these decisions. Once we get to a point, I agree, there's got to be a point where it does more damage to move one way versus just making the decision to stay. So,
as we've thought about this journey, and I would agree with everything they've said, you know, when we set out the benchmarks back in July, as the numbers were ramping up and we were seeing a lot of the safety concerns, you know, we did the initial staff question, how are you feeling? And 80% came back and said they were concerned about safety issues and some of those things, and also just how to provide the best learning environment. We set up the rubrics to do three things: mitigate the virus, individual student growth, and create safety. I think we did a really good job of setting up the benchmarks to do that in the first window. One of the things that I think we need to do a better job in continuing in our systemic thinking is thinking about the individual student growth domain, because that's what we're hearing right now. We're hearing the stress of the lesson, the stress of the teacher getting ready, the fatigue, the emotional fatigue, the kids' anxieties, etc., the failures, and those things. So one thing that I had suggested as I talked and I wrote into the parents last night, and I'm getting ready to do my YouTube conversation with them here in just a little bit, and that is we need to also shift the mindset right now to November 2nd is going to stage 4. We're gonna come back to school, and that's gonna be the new baseline for us. And the new benchmarks will be about measuring when would we go backwards. Instead of now, our benchmarks say, when are we gonna go forward? Because I think one of the things that's happened, even though I've talked to the community, I've talked to the building principals, I listed the sites that I look at the data is very concrete. What's happening with the trending? And as I shared the other day, and I've talked with both of them because we've been meeting each week to look at the dashboard, we are right now, as far as COVID positive rates, as high as we were back in July. That is true. But we've also, at this point, have a better handle on how to handle it. So ventilator use and some of those things that we talked about, flattening the curve, are actually better than they were back in that time frame. So we do need to look at getting the kids back. There's some other data points that we didn't consider in our metrics before, and that would be, you know, what's happening with the schools that are present. You know, one of the things, they're not seeing a lot of the outbursts. I just talked to another meeting, someone from Avon, and they said what they're finding is the kids that are getting positive tests are getting it away from school. When they do the contact tracing, it's not the school spot that did it. So with that, if we look at that information and where we need to go between November 2nd through December the 18th, we need to say that stage 4 is our baseline. so that nobody gets whiplash again, they won't get anxious again. Now, if something crazy happens and 50% of the world gets COVID and the 2 leaders are no longer leading at that time because they're out, then yeah, we would say there's got to be some pause along that. But right now, we need to just to tell the community and tell everybody we're going to re-establish benchmarks with all 3 domains focused, but we need to definitely talk about individual student growth inside of academics, inside of mental health, and then have that understanding. I understand where people are frustrated. Everybody wants to get back to normal. They want to get back. I want to get back. The teachers want to get back. The kids want to get back. We want to do it safely. And I think that's the balance that we're in. So next Tuesday at 8 o'clock, I've asked for a meeting of Mr. Lamb, 2 building principals, as well as Mr. Sprout. I also just invited a little while ago Mr. Harris, and I think he may be out, so I'm going to defer to either Carly or Mr. Norton, if you can attend, and Mrs. Martin. We're going to set the parameters and the limits of those new benchmarks. The other thing that I think caused stress as I reflect back, and Mr. Lamb and I talked about this, when we talked about trending data, we said, I need to look at all trending data. The medical experts were not going to give us a point in time and said, if it gets to 10%, that's the bad spot. Or 5%, that's a bad spot. They said, look at all of it over 2 weeks. And so we probably need to set a target date. A target. So when Mr. Ahaus is talking to his staff and they're like, what's David thinking? And he's like, well, the trend's going up. And they look at it like, okay, but it's not up that much. Or whatever is causing, when we all look at the same data, we need to have some specific targets in there that's going to say, that's our number. That's our number. Now, the medical field may not tell us what the COVID number is, but we can set up all the other numbers. And I think that we can do that. And then that will also help parents know what we're talking about. And so I think with that, I think that will ease everybody's mind and give us a sense of comfort. But right now, November 2nd, on that Monday, we're coming back. I also want to say, why did I push back 2 weeks from fall break? A couple significant things. One, we're seeing COVID trends definitely go up, and that makes up half of my structure. That is happening right now. Today was the largest one-day positive rate in the history of Indiana in COVID. It's up. The other factor right now in Johnson County is ages 5 to 19, it's increasing. That's our age group. So those things are concerns for us. And when we looked at that, and beyond that, COVID rules that we talked about in our benchmarks were attendance for staff, bus drivers, and availability for student teachers. We are going to have some trouble with bus drivers. And so in that 2-week cycle, that's going to allow us to get some of that back. And the other thing, as we look at fall break, everybody wants a break. We all want breaks. Maybe Steve doesn't. He likes to come. But everybody wants to break. And we're seeing a lot of families going away from Franklin. And as we come back, if somebody were to contract the virus on that Friday or Saturday, that 2-week window is what the medical is telling us needs for incubation. So that's why I pushed it back 2 weeks as opposed to coming back on the 26th. Because we actually had an extended conversation about how about the 26th. I talked to everybody, the medical people came back and said, you could do that, but that's not what we're going to tell you. So we stuck with the medical side on the 2-week window. But on November 2nd, we are coming back to stage 4. And the benchmarks that we'll establish and report out on the 19th in the next school meeting will reflect those. We'll post them, we'll share them, we'll talk about them like we did last in the July meeting. And I think that we'll be able to continue to provide the best learning environment. I know everybody's frustrated. I get it. We're frustrated. I'm frustrated. I hate looking at the trending charts as much as everybody else does and getting the other reports. I will tell you, wearing masks in the building is at 94%. That's where it is again this week. It was that way when I presented to the board. I looked again. The kids are doing a great job. The adults are doing a great job. This is going to be our superhero. We have to wear a mask. We know that we can't get the 6-foot barrier in all buildings at all times. We understand that. We're going to see higher numbers of kids getting isolated. That's one of the things that Mr. Lamb's going to ask us, and the two principals are going to be a part of. What is that number that would cause us to say, listen, there are just way too many kids out? Because, you know, the schools that are in, they're getting big numbers out. But compared to our isolations, big numbers. Compared to the entire student body, maybe not. So that's what we're going to have a conversation about. I know the principals are looking forward to that and helping set those benchmarks. And I do think it's the right time to do it. We've given 9 weeks. We've met the 3 goals are still our 3 goals. We figured out how to be safe. We can do some things. And we need to make sure the vulnerable kids are going to make it. Everybody in the U.S. is suffering the same thing. It's not just in Franklin, Indiana. The anxiety for everybody's going to be there. We have to help kids. And the other shining light of, I think, of COVID is showing the entire world how important a teacher is.
Yep.
Our teachers are amazing. And that's why they're hurting so much, because the kids are hurting. And the principals are doing a great job, and they're amazing. We need to now continue that step forward and shore up for the kids. And so November 2nd, we're going to do that. We're coming back. I know there'll be some people that won't like that answer either, but we're going to at least have the safest environment for that. And then we'll see, hopefully we'll stay all through the semester and go to January and keep going. And then the vaccine's going to be here, and it's going to be over.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is Mr. Ahouse still there?
Yes,
Yeah.
he
Yep.
is.
And Rita, so I wanted to go back to what you said. I'm trying to process it. So the first thing that I heard was that operationally that there needs to be a point where we just need to stick with where we are and take away the possibility of change, because that in itself is causing anxiety. And so in my mind, if we want to take away the anxiety of things changing, then that means we're more restrictive, not less restrictive. Because we're not going to go to 4 or 5 and say, no matter what happens, we're going to stay there, because that's not a possibility. So the alternative is to stay conservative and say, for the rest of the semester or the rest of the year, whatever, we're staying where we are. So I hear that as one piece. And then the other piece, like Ms. Holman said, was that so many of our kids need to be back in the building. And we need to get the kids in the building and the teachers in the classroom so everyone's getting the best learning environment. So in my mind, those two concepts are kind of competing. And I'm trying to get a sense from the both of you, if we had to weigh those two concepts, how would you rank them? And what's most important right now?
Well, I think that's probably why we're revisiting that conversation or bringing that conversation up is, I guess anecdotally, there are teachers who were scared to walk into our building in August who have come to me and said, look, we've got to get these kids back in the building. We have to get them back in the building. And they were the ones who were, at the very beginning saying, we can't even walk into the building. We don't even need to be going into the building. And now they're saying, our kids need us. We need to get these kids back into the building. And so, to the question of the change, I think it's more of the idea that we're going to stage 4, we're not. We're going to stage 4, we're not. We're going to stage 4, we're not. So it's more at some point, if we've got 2 weeks left in the semester, we've got 3 weeks left in the semester, do we even continue to entertain that thought of doing that? Not so much, maybe we'd get to the same point if we decide to stay, if we go to stage 4. I don't know that we would push through numbers that just surged so much that we felt we had to come back, but I think people would understand that. I think I can see that where that's contradictory, but at the same time, if we're getting the kids back in and things do get so bad that we're like, look, we have to step back, I think that's a change that people would understand that the effort was put in there, that we did all of these things, and we had to take that step back. Again, would that cause stress? Yeah, that would cause stress. I do think the stress of going back from 4 to 2 is different than the stress of going from 2 to 4. Logistically, if you're saying, well, we're
Okay.
going to go from having everyone in the building to just having half the kids in the building, that's different on custodial staff, that's different on cafeteria workers, that's different on aides, teachers, all of those kinds of things. That step is a different kind of stress than saying, you know, when will we bring all of the students back in the building? And they're accustomed to 2. We have not yet even got to 4, so I think there's already a stress in that. I mean, but I know the feeling in the building is different. The kids have done everything we've asked them to do when they've come into the building. I know that teachers start to feel differently because in the first month, I think it was kind of, how are we feeling? And everybody's trying to stay positive about what's going on, and everything's going well. Well, now it's starting to come out in grades, and now they're starting to lose kids, like lose kids. Like, can we even pull them back in at this point? We're looking at high school credits. Are we going to have kids? Can we recover high school credits from this semester for kids? Are we going to lose graduation track? Are we going to lose all of these kinds of things? And especially, like Rhea said, the most vulnerable of our students are we going to lose them? And one thing that I've brought up is, for those kids, it's not been from August 17th till now. It's been since March 13th to now. Yeah. So, I mean, we're coming up on a full calendar year of these students not being in the building and not having, you know, the routine of breakfast in the morning and lunch in the afternoon, and social workers and counselors and teacher relationships and all of those kinds of things. So while that contradiction I can see is certainly there, I think that effort of getting there, and then, you know, we would hope that nothing would happen, or we'd do the very best to make sure nothing happened. But if we had to take that step back, I think that's an understandable step back, that our teachers and the process would be different. I think to jump to phase 4, like I said, with maybe 2 weeks to go in the semester or something like that, you know, what could we potentially be gaining at that point with all of the stuff that would come with it?
Yep. So Steve, help calibrate us from a leadership side, or Rita. How many times or how many changes do you think that the board has put on you from a phase-to-phase change? So you have referenced a couple of times to me, not just tonight, but in other conversations, that I'm getting to believe that we have made you believe that there's been multiple changes, like we're going to phase 4 and then we've changed it, right? How many times do you think that has happened? In your view, what's your count there?
Well, I think it depends on where you go back to. I think if
So-
we go back to the start of school, it's even pushing school
we
back.
we started in phase 2, right? And
Right.
then how many times have you had to work through going to phase 4 to back to phase 2?
Well, we were having the conversation right before Labor Day, and then it would have been September 11th, September, what was that, 28th, 29th, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And then October 7th of this week,
Okay.
it'll be November 2nd. And I understand why we're looking at those things, and I think
No, it helps,
Yeah.
and I'm asking because
Yeah.
Personally, from the board, I'm thinking this is the first time that we've really talked about the move to phase 4 and then
Yeah,
back.
that's the disconnect.
Yeah, so, and that's what I'm trying to do, like I said, calibrate
Yeah.
myself on what is the disconnect. So that Labor Day, I don't know how it got to the point where, you know, people were making plans. That was never discussed at the board. So that's good
Yeah.
to know. I mean,
yeah.
because if that's causing disruption, we need to fix that as well.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know that it's physical plans. I mean, I don't know that teachers are moving desks and we're rearranging the cafeteria and that's the kind of stuff we did this time. I mean,
Right.
we did physical work around the building to get prepared. So I think there was definitely a little more certainty to that we were doing it this time. So, I mean, we physically went and got the building and got things ready to do things.
Yep.
Teachers did. The other ones weren't so much physical. I think it would probably go to what Rita said, is like each one of those checkpoints that comes up
Absolutely.
is
It's a mental.
is an anxious
it's a mental
moment.
check
I mean,
that
it's,
we've got to go through. That's right.
yeah.
That's right.
And I think you probably feel it as well. I mean, parents start feeling that too. So each time that there's a decision made, there's kind of this new wave of like, oh, you didn't do it, or oh, I'm glad you didn't do it, or, you know, whatever it is. So each
Right.
time that it comes up, I mean, the students feel that. This time I do think it was more real, so I think this one felt a little different. I mean, we had teachers come and say that students were like visibly upset that was going to happen. And again, I understand how all of that works, but I think it just, you know, November 2nd rolls around, there'll be this anxious feeling of like, are we doing this? Are we not doing this? Should I move this? Should I do this? Should I get this lesson ready? So it probably is more. I mean, I don't know if you want.
Well, I think one of the things, and we've talked about this, we set out in our opening, our reentry plan, calendar dates.
Yep.
They were big targets. So all those that you just hit, those were our calendar dates. The only one that wasn't, and that was because things were trending down, we wanted to maybe try to get it back, was there was 1 week in September where I said I would look at this week and then I would look at the next week. Other than that, it was big dates, and we told staff we're going to give you 10 days between
Right.
movement to give that, not knowing the crescendoing effect of anxiety. And I think that's what you're saying. So if you looked at the reentry plan, those calendar dates were there. The only time we've ever moved to stage 4 or verbally said it was on the 18th of September when we said October 19th. And the reason we did that, actually, as we go back in time to kind of reflect, things were trending down and or stabilizing in COVID, but we had 1 or 2 weeks before fall break. So it's that same conversation that Steve's talking about with getting ready for Christmas. We said, is it worth moving to stage 4 for a week or two? And we collectively said, no, let's hold on. And then hindsight would have been, yeah, let's go for it. And then see what happens. And I think that's where we are, and that's causing the anxiety of the staff. The staff, I would just say, I mean, they're worried about their kids.
Sure.
They-
No,
they-
my-
you know,
like I said,
so-
my-
no,
my
no,
point-
I appreciate that, but I just want to say that
Yeah.
it was those calendar dates.
Yeah, but my point on the question is, I think that we unintentionally, we
Absolutely.
have a gap in our communication, right, or expectation, because I think we've all been clear from the board to say all these are subject to change. And I don't think that has got down to your level. What does that mean, right? And so as we move forward, I think that we have to clarify that, because that is still going to remain, right? We're going to set new metrics and say, what's it going to take to get us to phase 2, right? Take us from phase 4 to phase 2, but that is subject to change. Because if the metrics just go crazy, right, then the change is going to happen quicker than we want, right? And the board is going to have to be able to react to that.
And David, when you said the calendar dates, you're talking about those checkpoint times that we established?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
So what Mr. Ayos is saying, I think, and I'm sorry I'm slow and I'm like literally on Zoom here, but when these checkpoint dates were closing in, people were feeling anxiety that there was going to be action based on those checkpoint dates. And so that's what was happening at the school level. But at the board, we didn't see those upcoming checkpoint dates as necessarily times where we would implement some kind of change. Am I hearing that the right way?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was a date in the calendar where we would all collectively come and think about a decision. I agree with Andy, you know, when we told everybody it's subject to change. I mean, I don't know, did the teachers know that? Did they know everything was subject to change?
I don't know how Rita's building felt, but I had no doubt that our building was in anticipation every time one of those dates came up as,
Yep.
what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, what's next? What will we be doing? There's no doubt. Like,
Right. And
the
that
conversations would be going on in the
Yeah.
building, like, hey, Friday, they're going to decide, you know, are we moving? Are we doing this? And
Right.
because I would be getting the questions. I'm like,
Yeah.
and I probably wasn't even answering the questions correctly. I mean, I was just, you know, like, I don't know. I don't know what, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. So I don't know if that's the same.
No, I think that it was, I think that and I don't know if I'm speaking for other people or just myself, but this subject to change, I think, is common sense, I think. So I think people probably know that it's not black and white and set in stone, but I would agree it's the anticipation that something could change. And that constant, every 2 weeks, anticipation that something could change. Just that whole, like, waiting is the hardest part, just kind of psyching yourself up one way or the other that something's going to happen. And then when something did happen, and this is what we're doing, and now we're going back, I think that it just kind of culminated there with that throughout the times that happened before, maybe.
Yep, no, I mean, that's good to know, and thank you for sharing that, because we, in setting those dates, because we wanted to be open on our communication, we wanted to make sure that people knew that we were looking at the data, the trends, we drove anxiety that was not intended to be there, right? So again, moving forward, we need to make sure that our new plan doesn't include that. Okay, no, thank you for that. Thanks for sharing that.
And so, Ms. Holman, what you're saying is the anticipation of change sucked, but we would rather have the anxiety of whiplash and get the kids back in school than be set in one phase and everyone know what's coming for the foreseeable future.
Again, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think our teachers and our students want to be back in the building enough that it would be worth the risk. I don't know that I want to say anybody would like to go back and forth. Like, have them all in and then we're back. And then the change will be stressful. So I don't know that I want to, I don't know, ideally we'd go back and we'd stay back. That's what we want to do. And I know that may not be possible. So I don't know how to weigh that for a large group of people. But I also know that I'm ready to get the kids back in the building. And I think that the risk right now of having to go backward outweighs the risk of not taking that chance. And that's my personal view.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Your insight's super important and very helpful. So thank you.
Mr. Wagner, I know FCTA met yesterday and we were talking, and Mr. Harris said during that meeting, he thinks it's about 50-50 on what the teachers would think about, do I go back or do I keep the model we have? I think that, I don't know how you guys see in your building, but I think that's where we are. Now, originally, remember, we were at 80-20. 80-20 said don't go back in the same model of that. So it is shifting back, and it goes back to those points of, can we help the vulnerable kid?
So is it possible that we can get, Steve and Rita, can we get you to survey those teachers in your buildings to help us, because you guys are impacted the most, right?
Yeah, and that was one thing I was, in part in our conversation that was still out there, like if there are things that we, I'm speaking for Rita here, that we can put together, that we can get to you, and that was really part of my conversation, is like we do have a set of metrics. We're now 9 weeks in. We have our building, we have building information now to how this is going. I think when I surveyed out after 3 weeks, that's, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about hybrid? How do you feel about virtual? Like, we're seeing the results of it now. And that is what's starting to get our teachers to shift, is they're starting to see, a teacher sent me in one of their science classes, a pretty solid group of kids, 21 kids, about 14 Fs and about 4 Ds, of pretty solid students. And just saying, like, I'm trying, I can't get them right now. And so, I mean, they're starting to see that, the results of it, and as I said, the one teacher that just came to me immediately and was like, has been one of our staunch people of not going back into the building, was actually all online. A person saying we should be all online at the start, that's like, we've got to get our kids back in the building. And I mean, I'm seeing that in the building shift as they see some of those structures. And just little things. Today we sent out not 5 and 8 day letters for truancy. We sent out 14 and 18 day letters today for truancy, which is not something we would ever be doing at this time of the year. And so, I mean, those kind of things are starting to roll in. We had a big discussion today about seniors and some very serious senior graduation issues that are popping up, that if we don't, we're trying plan of attack, like how do we start attacking this now? Like we're starting to see these things bubble up. And that's on us. I mean, we have to do some of those things. So it's not just a hybrid model. I mean, that's not going to fix everything. So that's not the fix, and certainly the health data has to drive decisions as well. It's just some of those things. If you want to know some of those things, if you want us to pull stuff together, get you something, if you're curious about something, I'm not trying to speak for Rita, but I think we can try and pull together as much as we can to bring to the table, just to look at, and because I do think that those things start to weigh out a little bit.
Okay.
But, yeah.
And even though we won't be in your meeting next week, can we get a copy of?
Well, I was going to open up, so we can only have 2 board members
Yep.
at the meeting. So Ryan, Christie, or Becky, you're welcome.
Yep.
The meeting's from 9 to 9, or 8 to 9.
8 to 9:15.
To 9:15. One of you guys are welcome to join
Yep.
me.
8 a.m. to
Yep.
9:15?
And it will be, most likely still, it's going to be virtual, so you can be wherever you want. And then if we need to follow up, we can go from there. And then, yes, we will send out immediately after notes to the rest of the board as well.
Okay, I don't need to be there, I just
Yep,
would
no, I
like to
think
have
that's
the
an excellent
information
point.
afterwards. I just want
Yep.
to make sure, it's good to have the talking points.
Yep.
between people,
And
so.
so in this meeting, will you be coming up like for each of the schools, because I'm sure it's different because you have different number of staff. Would you have numbers that said, if we had 20 teachers out, that's our breaking point? And then like, at this school, it's this many teachers. And then would there be, if you had, I don't know, 20% of your kids out, are you going to have specific numbers? Is that what you're working towards?
We're working towards, yeah.
Okay.
Per
yeah.
building.
Per building, yes.
Well, but we're really just starting at the high school and the middle school.
Yeah,
Right.
well,
Right.
yes,
Right.
yes.
I think we haven't gotten down to that detailed
Right.
side of life, but we will look at that. I think if we still are a district K-12, I think so. We talk about shifting those rules. It may be a percent as opposed to that way. Steve's percent is going to be, a little more bodies than what Rita's would be on something, but we'll absolutely look at both global and inside the building. The hard part's going to be, we won't be able to say, Steve, you come back, Rita, you stay. We're going to have to agree that it's a 7-12 conversation together. At least that's how I think of it in terms of that, because.
I agree.
So.
Yep. No, I agree.
Why is that?
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, things like, if she's got X number of teachers out, but we don't have any
Right.
out, or if we're, in those kind of scenarios, I don't know if you see it that way, or are you talking more like bus drivers and things like that? Or
Well, I think like, if you have X amount of teachers out, it might be like a one-day cycle, but it would be a series of days that would cause us
Okay.
to break that. So yeah, I mean, it'd be like if a water main broke at the middle school, you can still come to school. So if we have sub-issues one day of 50% at the middle school, yeah, they may do something, but at that point in time, it's probably not even hybrid. It's probably just e-learning day or whatever based on that. So when I talk about it in terms of moving all to phase 4 or all moving back to phase 2 is what I'm talking about
okay.
in terms of that. When you're talking about attendance for kids and the emotional tolls of that's me.
Okay.
But I think that's going to be our great conversation we're going to have, and Andy and his expertise on setting those boundaries and limits will help us, just like we did last time. I do want to ask one more time as we get wrapped up, because Mr. Lamb and I had a conversation about the anxiety of the calendar. We talked a little bit about before, and in your mind, would it have been better not to have a calendar? And now you got to look at you're the building leader. You're from the building side. Would it be better not to have a calendar and say that's when they're going to tell me?
Great. Go ahead.
I'm speaking personally again, just thinking about it, maybe
Okay.
but I like that we continued to talk though on an administrative level about the data and making the decisions moving forward. But I think having that date looming may have increased that initial, but I don't know that I would have said that from the beginning, to be honest. I think I liked the idea of these posted dates and this is what we're going to do. In retrospect, maybe it would have been better to not have those dates announced and just know that we were having ongoing conversations.
Very good, thank you.
So next time COVID comes, we'll.
Next time, right, in our next pandemic.
Next time, Kobe, I'm keeping notes for the next superintendent when the pandemic comes. And I will pass it on to them. So in 100 years, we'll look back to see how good we were.
Yeah.
You know what, I will still say I'm very proud of our district. I still think we have the best plan.
Absolutely.
We've
And we got the best leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been phenomenal.
Yep.
You know, communication is always difficult. You know, before, when COVID started from March to May, I was talking to everybody every night just about. And people would log in. I think I had was like 550 people logged in to you know, a few people the next. And maybe that's the other thing we get back to. We talked about that a little bit yesterday, is so that people know what what we're thinking. Because I think that's the unknown. Steve and Rita might have known, and maybe they told a small group, the discussion group. But if you're not in the discussion group or you're not in the union, you don't always get to know everything, or intentionally or unintentionally, you know. So maybe that's an aspect we can get back to during this pandemic to say, listen, on Fridays, I'll have my own little coffee with the superintendent and tell everybody, here's what's going on, and that'll help them. I do think the calendar caused stress more than we realized.
Yep.
We talked about that yesterday. It's like,
Yep.
maybe it did. And I think for everybody else here, that's maybe what it seems like. And we didn't intend that, so.
Well, and I just, again, not speak for Rita, but I think she'd feel the same way. Like, I hope the board doesn't feel like we haven't been supportive or that we're coming
No.
with, you know, trying to be, you know,
No,
we're
not at all,
upset
Steve.
about it or anything like that, but I think both in our conversations, just at the building level, what we feel and what we hear and what we see and how things have progressed over the last 9 weeks, is just kind of coming back with like, okay, is there a conversation here around just kind of what's happening in the buildings? And so personal beliefs aside, I don't think neither one of us is this like a personal what we want. I think it's what we see in our buildings, and you start to advocate for the kids, and you start to advocate for teachers, and you start to, you have all these conversations with parents, and you start, calling parents, and you start dealing with kids and calling them in your office to sit down and talk to them. And, so it's all of that stuff that happens over 9 weeks. So you just start to get this picture of kind of what's going on that none of us had in August, and none of us had, at Labor Day, and you just start to develop that picture as it goes along. So I think I think we both felt like it's probably time for us to at least give a picture of what's going on in the building, and that as just more information to make decisions that are just extremely difficult to make in the first place. So if you found a right or wrong decision in any of this, then congratulate. Like I've yet to find one. It seems like every decision, there's no right or wrong.
Right.
It's like just how you're making the best decision. So appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah,
So.
Steve, personally, for myself and the other board can step in, this is not anything on you guys. There's no concern from the board that, trust or anything like that. You're bringing a level of perspective that we either didn't consider or we just don't have those details visible to us when we're making those decisions. So I'm not taking it that, that it's coming in here griping or anything like that. No, you're being part of the team and you're raising the issue, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, I feel like you're doing a great job in a really crummy situation.
Well, on a positive, I've never had middle schoolers so disappointed about not coming back to school before. They're ready. I've been talking to kids at lunch especially, and they want to be in school, and I don't know that I could ever have said that with such passion before, that they want to be here. So they're ready when we are to have them back in the building.
Good.
November 2nd.
All right.
Any other topics that we need to cover? Questions? Well, we got Steve and
No,
Rita
but
here.
just thank you to Steve and Rita for coming today.
Yeah.
That was super
Yeah.
helpful. You're both doing awesome.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.